And now this is Acts chapter 15, verse 33 through to 41. Remember, Silas and Judas Barsabbas have come to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. And after they'd stayed there, had spent time there, they were sent away from the brethren in peace to those who had sent them out, i.e. back to Jerusalem. But it seemed good to Silas to remain there. So it seems like Judas Barsabbas went back with the rest of the people who were from Jerusalem. They went back, but Silas stayed. But Paul and Barnabas stayed in Antioch, teaching and preaching with many others also the word of God. Isn't that sweet? There were many others also who were preaching. It wasn't just wasn't the one or two kind of, what's the word, great preachers who everyone would flock to, but it was with many others preaching the word of the Lord. And after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let's return and visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaimed the word of the Lord and see how they are." Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, along with them also, but Paul insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another, and Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord, and he was travelling through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. So this kerfuffle in Antioch had been sorted out, and Paul says to Barnabas, "Let's just go and see how everyone's getting on in Asia Minor and wherever we went, in Cyprus and so forth." Barnabas wants to take John Mark. John Mark, it would seem, is now back in Antioch. Perhaps he's come up with the brethren, with Silas and Barsabbas, and he's come up, he's there, and he feels accepted despite deserting Paul. And then Barnabas says, "Come on, let's take John Mark too." And Paul says, "No, look, no." And I'm adding here, but it would seem to me that John Mark must have been then in the church in Antioch. He must have been part of the body of believers. Perhaps Paul loved him, cared for him. But when it comes to taking somebody with you on a missionary journey, you want to know that from the outset you have people that you can trust. And I'm sure it was Paul just saying, "Oh, don't really feel I can trust John Mark. Is it all going to happen again? Is he going to come with us for a bit and then hoof it back to Jerusalem or whatever?" But Barnabas says, "No, let's take him. We've got to take him." And it's Paul and Barnabas who fall out over this. Barnabas, as we've seen through the scriptures, the son of encouragement, is there, and John Mark is his cousin. And Luke very rarely gives a value judgment on the actions that happen. He doesn't say, "And Barnabas was right," or "Paul was right." This is what happened. And it's interesting that Barnabas then goes to Cyprus. And early we hear that was his home. That's where he was from. He was from Cyprus. Perhaps John Mark was from Cyprus too. We don't know. Although his mother lived in Jerusalem and had a house there. So they went to Cyprus. And Paul chose Silas, who was also from Jerusalem, to go with him, to go overland to visit Derbe and all the other towns, Pisidian, Antioch and what have you. Go to those places and see how the brethren are getting along. It's amazing that they should just think, well, let's just see how they're getting along. And it's almost like there's an anticipation they'll be doing well. They'll be doing, and they've got this no doubt perhaps they'll be thinking too, I bet those Pharisees have been around telling them they've got to get circumcised. So we've got our letter from Jerusalem. And I've got Silas too, who's a man of standing in Jerusalem, and will tell them, make it clear to them that they don't need to be circumcised, they don't need to follow the law of Moses. But Paul and Barnabas here, they split. They divide. And some people may say how sad, but really you ended up with two missionary bands going off rather than one. And God is into multiplication. Multiplication. And here we see one band goes to two. And we see that further on in the scriptures as Paul goes, it's got people all over the place. God is so good.